Jumping into Men Moving Mountains podcast, we got, well, I want to say a special guest, obviously, but the first guest of the Men Moving Mountain podcast. And a funny backstory with this is when I had a podcast years back during the pandemic, well, prior to the pandemic, called the Solopreneur Society, our last guest that was on there, and we had met the same day we did the podcast, was Alex Brockman. And he happens to be the first guest doing the Men Moving Mountain podcast. So Alex, it hadn't been a long time since I've talked to you, but a long time since we've been in a studio.
Has indeed. Yeah, it's almost as if, 6.5 years just kind of fly by. And well, 6 years. Yeah. It was March. Holy smokes. Six. Yeah.
A lot.
So is, just like we left.
A lot of time. So
yeah, the world's no different, is it?
No, it's no different. And I reached out to Alex about it because we have a lot of things in common. Alex is obviously a husband and a father, which is something we wanted to get on here to speak about to some degree. He's obviously a serial entrepreneur. But most importantly, what's funny is when we had our first podcast, and we didn't know each other. It was through a mutual friends, like, come on here. And then you came on thinking it was one thing, and then you kind of told a bit of your backstory, and then it was like you're walking out and you're like, did we just become best friends? We're like, that felt like it was like a real situation. So I figured we could easily duplicate that today. Because obviously when Austin launched Men Moving Mountains on social media, we started getting a lot of traction on social media, in particular TikTok, where guys are talking about, first of all, they're talking, right? Which is like the first part we're trying to get men to because they don't speak. And seeing that Alex has a unique background and another thing that he does looking over men in his own domain, we're going to get into all of that. But I think what a better guest to have who's an entrepreneur, a husband, a father, and somebody who's had some mountains he's had to move out of his way to have this coming on today and just having a chat, man.
Absolutely. Happy. I mean, couldn't be more grateful for you guys, the relationship that we forged back in March of 2020 that's led to where we are today. Like that 6 years, we've done a lot together. We've made a lot of introductions. We've done a lot of business together. And I think that's just, you build relationships, and it starts with, I think this is what I talk with a lot of guys, in the world that we live in right now, where we've got all these different social media platforms, we've got all these different platforms and mediums to try and get information out there. I think the main thing that we lose is that people only do business with people that they know, that they like, and that they trust. Right?
Yeah.
And I think we get super transactional whenever we try and skip those steps and we just try and have somebody, buy something from us.
Right.
But real relationships is ultimately what life is all about, right? The depth of our relationships. I just read a book recently. It was called Fighting Shadows. Brilliant book. And it talked, there was a long study that MIT had performed, or not MIT. I think it was Harvard actually. So Harvard did this study. It was like a 60-something year study, covered these guys' entire lifetimes, and they studied what was, kind of the three main things that led to satisfaction with life, just like overall quality of life. And two of them were the depth of their relationships, the proximity of those relationships, because we get into life, we just start doing things, right? And with everything being, easily, I can Uber Eats this, and I can get I can catch a lift to this place. We don't have these kind of haphazard encounters with the people that we're closest with anymore.
Right.
A lot of times we just go home, we sit down after a long day, do the, and then we turn on Netflix and start binging, yeah. Right? And we have people deliver our food. We don't make, there's 1,000 different ways that we can go, but it was the quality and the depth of the relationships and the proximity to those people, and how many times that it was just hey, I was walking by your house and just thought I would stop in and say what's up. And when you really go back to it, that's how we were raised.
Yeah.
When you go back to when you were a kid.
Yeah.
The kids that you grew up with, and it was just knock, knock. Hey, what are you doing? I have no idea. Let's do it together.
Yeah, exactly.
That part.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And we lost that. I don't know where. And I think everybody's gone through that in one way, shape, or form as you get, the adulting phase.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out how to grow out of that childhood phase and start being a provider and all of it. So yeah, it's understandable. But if we can curate that somehow, and I think that's what a lot of guys that I've been surrounding myself with, I entered into some really cool circles over the last 3-4 years, that's what we've been, blessed to be able to create is, there's meetings that are on the calendar, but we also we just stop by, we just hang out, we just do life together. And I think that's a massive component that the world misses. Right?
I don't disagree with you. And I want to touch on some of that too, because you mentor a lot of guys, right? And so these are some statistics, and we've talked about them on here before, about the study in 2021 that American Life revealed that 15% of men had no close friends, a dramatic increase from just 3% in 1990. Fewer men with many close friends. The percentage of men with 6 or more close friends plummeted from 55% to 27%. And it's this peak loneliness for males around age 35. And what's interesting is when I used to do this thing, again, pre-pandemic, I used to do a thing called Dinner for Titans. And I would get male-only entrepreneurs that own their own business to all show up, not for a networking thing. We'd sit down. We did it at Bravo for a while because we had the back room. And you just order whatever you order. You pay for your own deal. You're not obligated. And we didn't run any formal thing. We just broke bread. And people would talk about their wife passing away, whatever it was. And they quickly realized that there was no BS, because I'm not there to say, here's what I do. What do you do? Are we ever going to talk again? And what was weird is there was an author that came out to one of those that told me one time at that time, he goes, you know how imperative it is? He goes, after the age of 35, men have less than like 2 people that they can count on, to talk about their problems, especially like if they're the breadwinner, the husband, whatever. It's like you're making the money, driving to the kids' sports, coming home, and it's like, honey, the door's broken. No one's checking in with the guy. And I want you to speak to this because 1, I know you mentor guys, and 2, you went from dating to 1 kid, 2 kid, 3 kid, married, the whole deal. So you've seen kind of that evolution of life that regardless of having kids or not, that I think you can shed a lot of light on, because you also mentor guys and you can really see where they're lost or what a lot of these issues are, even if it's, what do you want to call masking it, right? Like we, with some other thing that they're doing that, they're trading one problem for another sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think, the way that the framework was really kind of delivered to me, Chris, was through Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think that's where, in the first conversation that we had, it was just like, well, apparently if you want to know what's going on with me, this is me, right? Because I think at the very beginning of that, I was at the early stages of trying to put together this project that I felt was an assignment that was given to me. And I know where it came from, but it was in the midst of all those goings on at the end of 2019 and then early parts of 2020, several members of my family were diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And, so I'm going to leave that there. It's, going to make sure that I'm not saying, hey, it runs in the family. Well, there's a lot of things that ran in the family and then they're going to run into me. Yeah. Right. And that's just not going to continue. Right. Sure. And I think that there's some power in just saying, hey, a lot of that stops here. And so one of the ways that project was to just kind of outline that transformation, kind of that rebirth that I had. And so you mentioned, just the framework that was given to me was mentorship ultimately, but it was a sponsor-sponsee relationship, right? So in AA, somebody goes in, the main thing that they tell somebody new is like, don't drink today, and go find somebody to go and start working the steps with. Work the program, do the thing, right? Yeah. And so I've just taken that and kind of said, well, I see that in scripture. I see that in a lot of different disciplines. I see that was the way that we used to do things corporately, right? And professionally, back 200, 300, 500, 1,000 years ago, you would go sit under the tutelage of the master blacksmith or the master carpenter, and you would apprentice under them. You would learn from them. They would be your sponsor. You would be their sponsee. You would be their, they would be your discipler. You would be their disciple. Yeah. Right. I have to show you the way. Come and follow me. Right. That's that's the OG. I know Junior doesn't have a mic, but it sounds a little bit about our relationship. Yeah. I mean, but that's what it is. Yeah. No, that's you're right. Yeah. And so in lieu of that, if a lot of, there are a lot of guys that are just going out there and they graduate from high school, they go to college, they start on this they start on this kind of like corporate ladder climb thing. And what they realize is, we might have the same business card, but everybody's wearing their own sweater underneath their suit. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So what I mean by that is like everybody's, running their own, they're working for themselves inside of that organization of 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, 20 people. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
If it's a 10-person company, that person is still looking out for their best interests, and they'll do whatever they need to try and like step over you, climb over you, claw you out of the situation. Like in the early parts of my career, I saw that. Right. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the game, and you have to understand the game that you're playing in order to play it well. Yeah. It's not a bad thing. You just got to know what you're playing.
That's
right.
It. Yeah.
And so it's not just go to school, get good grades, get a good job, work there for 30, 40 years, and then retire with a pension and Social Security and your savings and all that kind of stuff. Like the first two legs are all but gone, right? There are no defined benefit plans anymore. You're in insurance, you know it. And then maybe 1% of companies might have anything resembling that. And then you've got, the Social Security thing, and depending on who you ask, like 2034, that's not necessarily going to be a viable concern moving forward. So you're left to savings, and you're left to your, 401ks. And we all know the tragic war stories of people's, life savings from 2001, 2008, 2015, market drop in 20, right? Yeah, we've had a nice K recovery and all that kind of stuff. But there is like that's volatility, right? And so it's that, I think, and Chris, you let me know what you think about this. I think it leads to this entrepreneurial resurgence that has come back over the last probably 5-6 years. It really started with the gig economy that kind of told people, hey, if you are trading time for money, you can trade more of your unused time to go make more money, right? Go drive Uber, go do this, go, do whatever, just gig it out, right? That's fine. I love that. And I think that there's also just people are kind of saying, well, if I don't want to trade time for money, if I actually want to build something that scales, that's going to be something where I need somebody who's been down those paths before, that knows where the hurdles are, the turtles, the roadblocks, the pitfalls, all of that kind of stuff. Somebody that has been through this journey. And again, this just comes down to hero's journey, archetypal story stuff. The guy that left the village, voyaged through the forest, avoided all the, had to slay this dragon, had to go through the slough of darkness, had to go through the swamps, had to go through everything to go and pick up his vestments and slay the dragon, and then bring the head of the dragon back to the town to show everybody what he did, and then hand the sword to the next guy. Because when you slay the head of the dragon, 7 more appear, right? And so this is the story that we've been telling for a long, 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 long time. I think that there's just been this individual kind of like solopreneur, I'm going to go out there and forge the world myself, this kind of like Lone Ranger cowboy type of mentality that I understand where it comes from. But I think that that's like one of the greatest tools of the enemy, is to make us think that we can do something alone when we know at our core that we are better together. Right.
I always say that too, because I hate the term self-made man, right? There's that statue of him chiseling himself out. But the reality of it is, if we went through your backstory or mine, somebody gave it a break. Somebody did, you know what I mean? Like
always.
It's not that. But what is it with men in particular? Because obviously you've mentored a lot in different areas around different pillars that we'll get into. What is it with them, though, where men, for some reason, again, to your point, want to Lone Ranger it. They want to think everybody's may or may not be competition. They always want to let everybody know that they're killing it, even when they're not, even if they're dying inside or it's like they'll do anything but ask for help.
Yeah.
Like because I even see it in our world with businesses that we do, because, they get audited. So you know what total sales are. And it's just like, if there's anything you need from me, let me know. But it won't, this whole, like, why do men feel that they need to keep up with the Joneses, to this level? And it's not even about making money and spending money. It's just trying to do your own thing, even if it's obviously not working, and not wanting to ask for help. Yeah. Right.
I mean, we could go probably about 50,000 different directions with that. If we start dating back into like post World War II, when everybody came back, and we're 100 years into the Industrial Revolution at that point. Everybody's working for themselves. Like do you remember what the date was for the first Labor Day?
No.
Right? We celebrate Labor Day in September. I think it was 1895 was the Labor Day parade. Yeah. Because it was the collection of all these people that were trying to figure out what it actually meant to go and work for somebody else, because 100 years previous to that, everybody else either had their own company or they worked their own land.
Yeah.
So no one knew what it looked like to work for other people, and nobody knew what it looked like to have other people work for them.
Yeah.
So this is like a new enterprise that we're trying to figure out. And so if you date like all of that back, over half of the people, 60 some odd percent, all work their own thing. And then if you fast forward that to 2025 or just go 2020 census data, right? There was only 6% of people that actually own their own company. 90+% of people work for somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. And so if somebody like that whole model that I mentioned earlier of the apprentice and the master working together in unison for a transference of knowledge, for a transference of wisdom, for a transference of skill set, for a transference of all these things, that's just not the way that we understand it in our common nomenclature. It's just not part of our diction. It's not part of our dialect anymore. And so the whole like projecting what we want the world to think of us as is, it's just, I guess, Instagram has become our sport, right?
Yeah.
For lack of a better term. And, the internet is a beautiful thing in so many different ways. And I do agree with a lot of the guys that are out there that say you've never had more opportunity to go and create something. But a lot of times it's just like a vanity contest. And, let me go on one vacation to the Lake of the Ozarks and then throw it in Photoshop and make it look like I'm in the Maldives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then use that one weekend and make it look like I go on trips all the time and I, sign up for my course and I'll do this kind of stuff. And so that gets lumped into mentorship. And it's like those two are very, very different things. Paying somebody for knowledge and information, that's a consultant or a counselor.
Right.
Mentorship, as it is described by John Maxwell, right? Pretty much like the preeminent author on mentorship, says that mentorship is a relationship that is earned, it's never paid for, and it develops and deepens with time. So like those two things could not be further from the truth, right? Or further from each other, let's say. And so when somebody mentors somebody, they have to earn that relationship. I don't have to earn anything with a consultant or with a counselor or with a coach. I pay them money and they perform a task and a service. That's a fine business model, right? I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the guys that do coaching and services and all that kind of stuff online. God bless them. More power to them. But don't convolute the two, right? Because a mentoring relationship is truly like, that's one of those things that's been the differentiator in my life, is having mentors. And I've tried to like outline them in different areas of my life. I kind of live by this quadrant, a life well lived is one where you're maximizing the results in the 4 F's of life. So you have faith, family, finance, and fitness. And I think whenever you have somebody that can sit at the center of that and then show you what it looks like to maximize your faith, right? Understanding who you are, whose you are, what your giftings are that came from your creator, and then who needs those gifts, right? It kind of goes to Japanese ikigai, right? What are you good at? What does the world need? What can you get paid for? And what breaks your heart? Like marry some of that stuff together. And maybe that's the thing that you're supposed to do, right? You don't need to go to the Himalayas and try and like go to the top of the mountain and seek divinity. You should probably just do a little mental exercise and you'll probably put yourself 1 foot closer than, spending all that time going to the mountaintop. That can be the mountaintop, is just that humble submission of that request to your creator. And then what does it look like to be a good, to lead a family? Well, you've got to be in submission to something. If you want people to follow you, you have to be submitted to something else.
Yeah.
And that's a massive component. It ties back to faith, but it's ultimately like, I can't lead well if I'm not being led well.
Yeah.
Right? There's a great book called Leaders and Followers. There's a great book called Do Hard Things, and it all says the same thing. You can't lead if you're not led. Right?
Yeah.
So I can't lead my wife if I am not led by somebody who is also a really good husband.
Yeah, that's how we get a dictatorship.
That part.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I can't be a good sacrificial father, right? Because a lot of times, and when we talked about this, let me kind of Tarantino us a little bit when you were talking about, where did this kind of make a left turn? And maybe it's 60 years ago, 70 years ago, whenever the movement of all the different, kind of the feminist movement and all that. Like, I'm not saying that I have 3 girls. I want them to be independent forces. And my wife is a lioness, and I do not want to tame that lioness, nor do I want my daughters to be, like these little docile creatures. I don't want them to be house cats. I want them to be lionesses as well.
Yeah.
But they need a lion. They need the king, right?
Yeah.
That's when we're working in perfect unity with each other.
Yeah.
And when I'm submitted, then there's unity and there's like harmony in the household. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense.
Right. And so that's like, what does it look like to be a good father? What does it look like? Most importantly, what does it look like to be a good husband? What does it look like to be a good father? Then literally everybody else comes in. You can lead people in your corporate facility. You can lead people in whatever else way. But if they come and inspect, right? If they're a fruit inspector and they come and see like, well, he's given me all this advice on ABC 1, 2, 3. Let me see how his house actually operates. What is his relationship with his wife? How do his kids look at him, right? Do they want nothing to do with him? Because if his wife has disdain for him and his kids don't really have that strong of a relationship and they're not like, daddy, whenever he comes home. And I know that changes, it's way different when the kids are 3.
Yeah, versus 9.
Versus 20, right? Or versus 16 or something. Like, you're not going to get the daddy whenever they're 16. They're doing their own thing. But that's part of the plan, right? You have that limited time from whenever they're newborns to, probably 7, 8, 9 years old. And then, it's what you've put in them that will then help kind of navigate those teenage years and all that kind of stuff. And I'm heading towards that, and it terrifies me. But it's also like, I know that we've tried to do everything that we possibly can to like put in versus, to try. Because, it's really nice to give your kids a lot of stuff, but it's more about what you're sowing into them and the example that you're setting in the relationship, right? Because my 3 girls are going to, the first example that they have whenever they go and look for somebody that they want to do life with for the rest of it is what was the model that was set.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a responsibility.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Just a skosh.
Yeah.
And then, so you got faith, you got family. And on the family side, it's like Jordan Peterson 101. Don't go out and try and solve the world's problems if you don't have your own house in order.
Right.
Start micro to go to the macro, right? Make your bed, clean your room, create a place with your own dwelling, with your own house. And then once you've kind of like put that in order, then you can maybe try and go replicate that if somebody else inquires, right?
Yeah.
And so it's micro, it's your neighbor, then your block, then your neighborhood, then your city, then your state, then your nation, then your world. But it goes from the micro out, right? And I think we want to change the world with all these big grandiose ideas. But it's like, well, let me be a fruit inspector and see what that process, what that philosophy that you're projecting, how is that applied at your own house?
Yeah,
right?
I say one of the points I want to make that you're making there too, we try to tell men about all the time too, is 2 things I want to get into. One, not everybody's a good mentor. So I say don't take advice from somebody you're not willing to change places with, because when I came up raised by a single mom, any guy that I seen had any bit of success, I was enamored by. Most of them, not necessarily overall good people, or to your point, their kids would talk about them and that. So that's very important too. Where are you getting the information? The other thing that I want you to hit on is what we talked about on one of our last podcasts, was men not being wrapped up in this lie identity, right? Believing that they're the CEO, that they're all these things, right? Because when you pass away, you can't do a biopsy and find the podcaster, so that when these certain roles in your life may or may die, whether the relationship ends or the kids grow up and they leave the house or the wife files for divorce, you're not that thing. Like, I think men are such providers that you put all your stuff off to take care of everybody else. And then when one of those things go wrong, all of your identity is wrapped up in, but this is who I am as I take care of, this thing. I am this thing. Yeah. Right. It's trying to share with men that you're all of these things.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's man, that's a really good question. And so the way that I look at that is, relationships, the best relationships that I have a common, thread in between them. They're unified by something. And it's, we joke about that line from what is it from Austin Powers where it's like, you complete me, right? When he's got mini me.
Yeah.
So it's like the you complete me thing. And I think, well, a lot of times, we think about that in a form of balance, and it's really not. Like, you complete me would suggest that, it's 50-50, right? I'm going to give my 50%, you give your 50%. In total, we're at 100. I think relationships, when they're thriving, is whenever it's an individual that's living at their 100%, the other individual that's living at their 100%, and they're striving after a common goal. So that unifies to a 300% equation, right? And so for me, like, that's the Spirit of God. Whenever I'm in submission, this is just kind of Scripture 101, because a lot of people will just be like, well, wives, submit to your husbands, blah, blah. I don't want to do that, right? Well, if you read the whole thing, what he's saying is, wives, submit to your husbands just as the husbands submit to God, right? And so that's where that whole thing on the family side is, what does it look like to be a good son of God? What does it look like to be a good husband? And what does it look like to be a good father?
Yeah.
Right. And so if I'm a good son of God and I'm submitted and I'm striving after my heavenly Father, and then I've also got men that are pushing me towards that and guiding me and discipling me and mentoring me and leading me in that way, then that gives me the greatest ability to be the best husband that I can possibly be. And so that relationship is, when I'm living at the max and she and my wife is living at the max, that's when we're humming. That's when we're a force to be reckoned with. When we think it's like, well, I've got my inconsistency here, or I've got, I'm not carrying my weight, or you're going to have to like fill in the gap for me. And it's like, well, yeah, that absolutely can happen. But in like, just philosophically, it's, let me be the best version of myself. Let me strive after this. Let me be me. And then you be you. And together we are something that is in and of itself an entirely different entity. The relationship is something in and of itself. And so the, what was the word that you used? Like how people project, this like facade out there and just saying, well, this is the lie-identity. Right?
Yeah.
My identity has to be rooted in truth, right? It has to be rooted in truth. And and there's a lot of guys that are out there that have done a really good job at this. And they just say like, hey, I'm at this phase right now. And then they get swallowed by the guys that are out there saying, well, look at me. I'm a paper billionaire and this, and look at me traveling all over the place. And so we just compare our insides to other people's outsides all the time. And that's a losing battle, right?
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to go and try and like just spend 6 hours a day going like this and saying, how do I stack rank to the world?
Yeah.
Whenever you're not even seeing the full picture.
Right. Yeah. That's like they say, if the guy shows up with the young gal in the Ferrari, it's not enough to say you want her and the Ferrari. You got to change places entirely with that guy.
Yeah.
And you don't know what that story is. It's weird. I mean, obviously they say that, right? The thief of joy is comparison.
Yeah.
And I think men do that too often. I think, a lot of fatherless households are a problem, again, setting that precedent, mentoring, early. What's interesting when I was in the trades, because I've done all types of blue collar work prior, was what was interesting in the mechanic realm and the auto body realm is when they switched to flat rate. So they came out with books that said, here's what you're working on. Let's say you're replacing a quarter panel and you get paid 4 hours. So if you get it done in 2, you get paid 4. You get it done in 6, you get paid 4. So when guys knew that, they could get an 80-hour week and a 40-hour week. What slows you down then? Teaching the next guy how to do that. And it started phasing that out. I would say same with careers, right? To get up the ladder and claw your way up. You don't care who you're bringing with you.
Right.
You're just trying to climb that rank. What do you find? This is a question I want to ask you, because you and I, by circumstance, faith, etc., found personal development in many ways. I would argue, and again, this isn't pointing the finger, would you say, because you meet a lot more guys than I do because you're involved in different things and different mentoring situations than I am. Does it surprise you how little guys even consider personal development? Like, how when you meet grown men, for instance, where some of it's obvious what they should be doing, but it doesn't occur to them. Like those people that are just like, well, this is just the way I am. People got to accept it. It's like, no, but it can change.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you find with that? Like with grown men, I mean, it's weird, right? I guess, and again, if you weren't like, I was raised old school Catholic,
Yeah.
right? So that kind of sets some precedent, right? But for men that don't have that, like when you see in different organizations, including like AA, is it wild how many guys don't consider, like, again, getting back to simple things like reading of any kind, right? Or just submitting, like, you're not in charge of your life, even though, you think you are anyway. Like, what do you find with that? Like the percentage of guys that kind of just, again, they think they're ruling their own charge and figuring out that they're not the puppeteer and what needs to happen there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you look at I think there was a survey that was done a couple of years ago, and they surveyed the S&P 500 CEOs, right? Top 500 companies publicly traded, and they surveyed the CEOs, and they, hey, how did you get to this level, right? And the common theme was that they were readers, right? And so I think the average book total for a year that a CEO of a Fortune 500 company reads is nearly 40 books, right? So that's 3 a month. 3 books a month. That's, a lot of times it's almost a book a week. That I don't know, before meeting a lot of the guys that I get coached and mentored by, I was just starting to get back into books. And I remember reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad for the first time at like 30. And I remember getting it at 17 or 18, and it was just always one of those that was on the shelf. It was like $7 at the time. And I'll ho-hum, I'll get to it whenever I get to it. So I remember getting to it and then like throwing it after I finished it. And I'm like, I didn't know that the game could be played a different way. Yeah. Because the nursery rhyme is go to school, get good grades, get into a good career, and then work there for 40 years. And then you retire with, maybe 20, 30 years left on your life with 40% of your income and 40% of your energy, right? I just didn't know that there was other ways that you could go and do it. I didn't know what the path was to true entrepreneurship, because a lot of times entrepreneurship classes are taught by people that aren't entrepreneurs, right? Yeah. Let me go learn from a plumber as to how to be a doctor. I would rather not. Right.
Again,
there may be some similarities, but not a ton of them.
Careful where you get your advice.
Precisely. Be a fruit inspector.
Yeah.
God forbid. Like, go see what these people have created. What's their agenda? Right. So let's just talk about mentorship for a second. Like, what is the agenda of the person that could potentially be mentoring me? What are they actually after? Is it purely like they're not in the same industry as me, but they've got a lot of success in their life, and there can be some just like base layer principles of things that have transferred? Okay, well that's one thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. I would tell everybody to go and try to find somebody that has what they want in life in those 4 F's. And then what are the results that they have, right? Be a fruit inspector. Go check it out. What's their faith journey? What's their family situation look like? What was the financial journey that they went through? Because a lot of really successful people have gone through periods where they were bottomed out and broke and like
9 visas maxed out.
Oh my, like it's wild. And so the entrepreneurial journey looks very different for a lot of different people. And the people that are 50 something years old and they've got the private jet and they've got all this kind of stuff, that's lovely, but that's not the full story. To your point earlier about the guy, the girl, and the Lamborghini, you're seeing a snippet in time.
Yeah.
You're not getting the full narrative. So go and inquire as to what that narrative actually was, right? And I think that's what AA does really well. That's what faith should be really well. When you say, what is my testimony, right? That's somebody's story in AA. In AA, we talk about where I was, what happened, and what I'm like now, right?
Yeah.
And so let me understand what got me. What were the trials and the tribulations and all the different things and all the war stories and all the ooga booga bags, like the scary stuff in the closet that you said that you were taking to your grave that nobody would know. And whenever I can earn the trust from somebody by showing them, hey, I've been sober for 17 years. I've walked probably 250 people. I've probably walked 250, 300 people through the steps over that 17 years. Right? So I know what I'm doing. I know the book. I know the literature. I know the process. I know the steps. Do you want me to walk you through that? Because apparently you're like, and this is the difference in between AA and other walks of life, is this one very fundamental thing. When somebody walks into an AA meeting, they've already admitted something, right?
Sure.
So what do you think that is?
What?
What do you think that one, like
They're admitting they have a problem.
They're admitting that there is a problem.
Yeah.
And they're going to the church basement or some meeting that they found online. They're making a move towards something.
Yeah, towards a solution.
They don't know what it's going to look like. They have no idea what it's going to look like to be, completely unraveled by the steps, because that's what happens. It's a true transformation if you do it correctly, because the last step says, after having had a spiritual experience as a byproduct of these steps, right? That's how it starts. That's the last one, right? So when you go from step 0, which is just a willingness to ask yourself the question of what if I did something that made my life different, right?
Yeah.
And then the first is saying that there's a problem. We admitted that drugs and alcohol had made at least part of our lives that's an abridged version that I grew up with. But like pure AA, we admitted that alcohol had made our lives unmanageable. Period, full stop.
Yeah.
Right? Second, there's a problem. The second step is we came to believe in a power greater than ourselves, could restore us to sanity. Third, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Right? And so that's 3 pretty big things right there. 1, willingness to at least do something. 2, which is step 1, admit that there's a problem. 3, admit that the solution is not me. And then step 3 is like turn your will and your life over to that solution, and he will then guide you through the action plan, which is 4 through 9. Then you continue on in step 10. And then at 11, like that's this part of this project that I've been trying to sort out for the last probably 4 years. Ever since our third daughter was born, I've been stuck at this one point, and I'm trying to figure out how to best articulate it, because it's still very theoretical in AA. It's the 11th step of AA is like, once you've gone through this journey, right? First, by admitting that there's a problem. Second, admitting that you're not the solution. Third, trying to find that solution, that you're in a spiritual game, not just a physical game or a mental game. And then you go through and you inventory it. You figure out where your, defects of character come from, and then ask God to turn those around. And, where you're prideful, lustful, envious, wrathful, slothful, wherever it may be, just invert those to the virtuous side of that same energy, right? Be selfless, charitable, pure, diligent, be meek, right? Meekness is not weakness. It's the whole Japanese proverb. I would rather have I would rather have a warrior in a garden than a gardener at war. That's meek. Somebody who's terrifying, that has his sword in his sheath and can wreak havoc, but he is electing peace. That's meekness, right?
Yeah.
So just because you're, some geeked out musclehead that's got, 500 guns in his basement, that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Right. I want the guy that understands how to control that. And that's where a lot of discipline comes from. That's like Khabib Nurmagomedov, like one of the things that he was interviewed after the whole Conor thing. And he was like, the thing that led to all of my success was discipline, right? Discipline. And I think that is a big component to this broader narrative. Like, we just lack discipline.
Yeah.
Right?
Across the board.
Across the board. We spend too much. We eat too much.
We say too much.
We say too much. We're undisciplined with our words, our time, our resources,
If today moves something in you, it's time to move something with you. Visit menmovingmountains.org and sign up for Uplift Men University, our online platform with powerful classes, brotherhood circles, and exclusive tools to help you rise.